never believed in fate until the night I met him. My name is Jasmine Washington, and this is the story of how a single moment in a Chicago emergency room changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and second chances. The fluorescent lights of Cook County Hospital had become my second home. At 29, I'd spent the last 3 years working the night shift as an ER nurse, a schedule that paid slightly better and kept me available for Aisha during the day. My daughter. My everything. At 5 years old, she was the only good thing that came from my marriage to Marcus, and the only reason I kept pushing through 18-hour days that left my feet aching and my soul exhausted. That October night started like any other. I'd dropped Aisha off at my mother's apartment on the south side, kissed her forehead as she clutched her worn stuffed rabbit, and promised I'd be back before breakfast. The autumn air had a bite to it, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the distant promise of winter. I remember pulling my jacket tighter as I walked to the L station, my mind already running through the checklist of things I needed to do before my shift started at 11. The ER was chaos when I arrived. Friday nights always were. A gang shooting had brought in 4 patients simultaneously, and the trauma bays were full of shouting doctors, beeping monitors, and the metallic smell of blood that I'd learned to tolerate, but never quite got used to. I tied my hair back, scrubbed in, and lost myself in the familiar rhythm of triage and treatment. It was nearly 3 a.m. when they brought him in. I was restocking supplies in Bay 4 when I heard the commotion at the ambulance entrance. 2 men in expensive suits were arguing with security, their accents thick with Korean inflections. Behind them, paramedics wheeled in a gurney carrying a man who looked like he'd been through hell. GSW to the upper left quadrant. The paramedic rattled off as they rushed past me. BP dropping, pulse thready. He's lost a lot of blood. I didn't think. I just moved. That's what 3 years in the ER teaches you. The thinking comes after, when your hands have already started the work that might save a life. I grabbed the crash cart and followed them into Trauma 1, where Dr. Reeves was already barking orders. The patient was a man in his mid-30s, unconscious but fighting. Even through the blood and pain, I could see he was strikingly handsome. Sharp features, dark hair falling across his forehead, and an air of controlled power that seemed almost palpable even in his vulnerable state. His suit, what remained of it, was clearly expensive, custom-tailored, the kind of thing that cost more than I made in a month. "Miss, you cannot be here." One of the suited men tried to push into the trauma bay, but security held him back. "Someone get them out!" Dr. Reeves snapped, his hands already working to assess the damage. "Jasmine, I need 2 large bore IVs now, and call the OR. Tell them we're coming up hot." My hands moved with practiced efficiency, finding veins, establishing access, hanging fluids. The patient's eyes fluttered open once, meeting mine for just a moment. They were dark, intense, filled with a clarity that seemed impossible given his condition. Then they closed again, and the monitor above his head started screaming. "He's coding," Dr. Reeves said, and suddenly we were in the middle of a full resuscitation. Compressions, medications, the desperate race against death that sometimes we won and sometimes we didn't. I lost track of time, lost track of everything except the rhythm of CPR and the prayers I always said silently during these moments, even though I wasn't sure anyone was listening. "We've got a pulse," someone said, and the collective exhale of relief filled the room. 3 hours later, after the patient had been stabilized and sent to surgery, I finally took my break. My scrubs were spattered with his blood, my arms ached from compressions, and all I wanted was to sit down for 5 minutes before the next crisis hit. I found an empty chair in the staff lounge and pulled out my phone, checking for messages from my mother. Nothing urgent. Aisha was sleeping peacefully, and for a moment, I let myself imagine I was there with her, instead of in this fluorescent purgatory. "Excuse me, are you Nurse Washington?" I looked up to find one of the suited men from earlier. Up close, he looked tired, worried, and far less threatening than he had seemed in the heat of the moment. Behind him stood another man, older, with silver hair and eyes that assessed me with uncomfortable precision. "I am," I said, standing up. "Is your friend out of surgery?" "He is alive because of you," the older man said, his English precise despite his accent. "Mr. Kang asked us to find you. He wishes to express his gratitude." "Mr. Kang can express his gratitude by following his post-op instructions," I replied, too tired to be impressed by whatever this was. "And by being honest with his doctors about how he got shot. We have to report gunshot wounds to the police, you know." Something flickered in the older man's eyes. Amusement, maybe, or respect. Mr. Kang is a businessman. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. These things happen in Chicago, yes? I'd heard that line before, from drug dealers and gang members and everyone in between who ended up in our ER with holes in them they didn't want to explain. I didn't believe it then, and I didn't believe it now, but it wasn't my job to be a detective. "Sure," I said flatly. "Whatever you say. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other patients to attend to." I tried to walk past them, but the older man held out a business card. "When you have time, please visit. Mr. Kang would like to thank you properly." I took the card more to end the conversation than anything else. It was heavy stock, embossed with gold lettering. Kang Min Jun, Import, Export Consulting. There was an address in River North, one of the expensive neighborhoods where I definitely didn't belong. "I don't need thanks," I said. "I was just doing my job." Nevertheless, the older man bowed slightly, a gesture that felt both formal and genuine. "We will be in touch, Nurse Washington." They left, and I stood there holding that business card, feeling the weight of something I couldn't quite name. I should have thrown it away. Should have forgotten about the mysterious patient with the expensive suit and the dangerous eyes. Should have gone back to my routine of work and Aisha and the careful, narrow life I'd built for myself after Marcus. But I didn't throw it away. I slipped it into my pocket, and that simple act set everything else in motion. The next week passed in a blur of exhaustion and routine. Aisha started having nightmares again, waking up crying for her daddy. Not Marcus, who she barely remembered, but for the abstract concept of a father that her classmates had, and she didn't. I held her through those nights, singing the lullabies my own mother had sung to me, promising her that we were enough, just the two of us. During the day, I tried to be everything she needed. We went to the park, made pancakes shaped like animals, read stories until my voice was hoarse. But I could see the questions in her bright eyes, the awareness that our family was somehow incomplete. It broke my heart every time. Marcus called on Wednesday. I almost didn't answer, but the lawyer had told me I needed to document every attempt at contact. His voice through the phone was slurred, angry, full of the same accusations and demands that had characterized the last year of our marriage. "You can't keep my daughter from me, Jasmine." "I'm not keeping her from you, Marcus. You have scheduled visitation. You just never show up. That's because you poisoned her against me. Turned her into a scared little..." I hung up. My hands were shaking. 3 years since the divorce, and he could still make me feel small, frightened, trapped. I looked at Aisha playing with her dolls in the living room, oblivious to the storm that was always brewing around us. And I made a promise to myself that I'd made 1,000 times before. I would never let him hurt her. Never let him turn her into the frightened woman I'd been. The business card sat on my dresser where I'd left it, a small rectangle of possibility that I kept meaning to throw away but somehow never did. I found myself thinking about the patient, Mr. Kang, at odd moments. Wondering if he'd survived his surgery, if he'd recovered, if he'd gone back to whatever dangerous business had gotten him shot in the first place. I told myself it was just professional curiosity. Nurses always wonder about their patients, especially the ones who come in critical. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There had been something in those dark eyes during that brief moment of consciousness, something that had reached past all my carefully constructed walls and touched something I'd thought was dead. On Thursday night, as I was getting ready for another shift, my mother called. She sounded worried, which immediately put me on edge. "Baby, there was a man here today. Well-dressed, foreign. He was asking about you and Aisha." My blood ran cold. "What kind of questions?" "Just casual things. Where you work, how old Aisha is." He was very polite, very proper, but something about him made me uneasy. I didn't tell him anything, of course, but I thought you should know. After I hung up, I stood in my tiny bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed older than 29, with tired eyes and worry lines that had appeared too early. I thought about the business card, about mysterious patients and men in expensive suits, about the way my carefully controlled life suddenly felt like it was spinning out of my grasp. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the card before I could talk myself out of it. A woman answered in Korean, then switched smoothly to English when I identified myself. "Ah, Nurse Washington. Mr. Kang has been hoping you would call. Can you meet him tomorrow? I will send a car." "No car," I said firmly. "Give me an address, and I'll meet him in a public place. Daytime. And I want to know why someone was asking about my daughter." There was a pause, then a different voice came on the line. Male, deep, with that same controlled power I'd sensed even when he was bleeding out on my trauma table. "Nurse Washington, I apologize if my associate frightened your family. That was not my intention. I simply wanted to ensure you and your daughter were safe." "Safe from what?" "From the same people who put a bullet in me. But we should discuss this in person. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock, at the Art Institute. The Museum Cafe. Bring your daughter if you wish. I promise you will be perfectly safe." He hung up before I could respond, leaving me holding the phone and feeling like I'd just stepped off a cliff into empty air. I didn't sleep that night. Between my shift at the hospital and my racing thoughts about the meeting, rest was impossible. When I finally got home at 7 in the morning, Aisha was already awake, sitting at my mother's kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and her favorite cartoon playing on the small TV in the corner. "Mommy." She launched herself at me, and I caught her, breathing in the scent of her coconut shampoo and feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. This was what mattered. This little girl with her bright smile and trusting eyes. Everything else was just noise. "Baby girl, how would you like to go to the museum today? See some pretty paintings?" Her eyes lit up. "The one with the lions outside?" "That's the one." My mother gave me a look that said we'd be talking about this later, but she didn't question me in front of Aisha. I was grateful for that. I wasn't sure I could explain my decision when I didn't fully understand it myself. All I knew was that someone had been asking about my daughter, and I needed to know why. Needed to look Kang Min-joon in the eye and understand what I'd gotten myself into by saving his life. We arrived at the Art Institute at 12:45. I dressed Aisha in her Sunday best, a yellow dress with white flowers that she loved because it made her feel like a princess. I'd chosen my own outfit carefully. Professional, but not formal. A burgundy sweater and dark jeans that hopefully said I was taking this seriously, but wasn't trying to impress anyone. The museum was crowded with tourists and school groups, the autumn afternoon bringing people out to enjoy the last warm days before winter set in. Aisha pressed her nose against the glass cases in the lobby, enchanted by the miniature rooms on display, while I scanned the crowd for a face I'd only seen once, covered in blood and barely conscious. Nurse Washington. I turned to find him standing a few feet away, and my breath caught. In the harsh fluorescent lights of the ER, fighting for his life, Kang Min-joon had been handsome. Here, in the golden afternoon light streaming through the museum windows, he was devastating. He wore a black suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair styled back from his face, and those intense eyes that I remembered were focused entirely on me, with an attention that made me feel simultaneously seen and exposed. "Mr. Kang," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You look much better than the last time I saw you." A small smile touched his lips. "I have you to thank for that. If you hadn't acted so quickly—" He broke off as Aisha peeked out from behind my legs, her curiosity overcoming her natural shyness. His entire demeanor shifted, softening in a way that seemed genuine. And this must be Aisha. He crouched down to her level, a gesture I hadn't expected from a man who carried himself with such authority. "Hello, Aisha. My name is Minjun. Your mother is a hero, did you know that? She saved my life." Aisha looked up at me, then back at him. "Mommy saves lots of people. She's the best nurse in the whole world." "I believe it," he said seriously, treating her statement with the gravity it deserved. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "I have a gift for you, if your mother says it's okay." I tensed, but when he opened his hand, it was just a small stuffed tiger, beautifully made, with embroidered details and a red ribbon around its neck. Aisha's eyes went wide. "Can I, Mommy?" I wanted to say no. Wanted to grab my daughter and run from this man and whatever complicated world he represented. But something stopped me. Maybe the gentleness in his eyes when he looked at her, or the way he waited for my permission instead of just giving it to her. Small things, but they mattered. "You can. What do you say?" "Thank you, Mr. Minjun." Aisha took the tiger carefully, hugging it to her chest like it was precious treasure. "Just Minjun is fine," he said, standing back up. His eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of something vulnerable there. "Shall we go to the cafe? I promise this won't take long. I know you must be tired from your shift." The cafe was quieter than the main galleries, with small tables overlooking the museum gardens. Minjun had apparently reserved a corner table, private enough for conversation, but public enough that I felt safe. He ordered hot chocolate for Aisha and coffee for me without asking, somehow knowing exactly what we'd want. The tiger sat in Aisha's lap as she colored on the paper placemat the waiter brought, seemingly content to let the adults talk. "You said someone was asking about my daughter," I started, not willing to waste time on pleasantries. "I want to know why." Minjun's expression grew serious. "I'll be honest with you, Nurse Washington. My world is complicated and sometimes dangerous. The people who shot me, they know you saved my life. They know your face, your name. I sent someone to check on you and your family to ensure you weren't being watched or followed." My hands clenched around my coffee cup. "So by saving your life, I put my daughter in danger?" "No." His voice was firm. "By saving my life, you became important to me. And I protect what's important to me. My people have been watching your apartment, your mother's building, the hospital. No one connected to my enemies has come near you. You're safe." "Your people have been watching me?" My voice rose slightly, and Aisha looked up with concern. I forced myself to calm down, lowering my voice. "That's not protection, Mr. Kang. That's surveillance. That's stalking. It's survival," he countered. "In my world, showing weakness gets people killed. If my enemies thought you mattered to me personally, they'd use you. So I've been careful, discreet. The man your mother saw was simply ensuring no one else was asking questions." "And do I matter to you personally?" The question came out before I could stop it, and I immediately regretted it. His eyes darkened with something I couldn't quite read. "You saved my life when you had no reason to. When you knew nothing about me except that I was bleeding on your table. That kind of courage, that kind of compassion, yes, Nurse Washington, that matters to me." We sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the cafe fading into background static. Aisha hummed softly to herself as she colored, oblivious to the weight of the conversation happening above her head. "I need you to be honest with me. I said finally. What are you? Drug dealer? Arms trader? Human trafficker? He didn't flinch at the accusations. I run an organization that operates in gray areas of the law. Import and export, yes, but not drugs or people. Information, goods that are difficult to obtain through legal channels, protection services for businesses in certain neighborhoods. I'm not a good man by most standards, Nurse Washington, but I have principles. Lines I don't cross. Like what? I don't hurt children. I don't traffic in human misery. I pay my debts and honor my word. He leaned forward slightly. And I take care of people who do me kindness. That's why I asked you here. Not just to thank you, but to offer you something. I don't want your money. Not money. Protection. He glanced at Aisha, then back to me. I've done some research of my own, Nurse Washington. I know about your ex-husband. I know about the restraining order he violated twice. I know he's threatened to take Aisha from you, to use his family's connections to claim you're an unfit mother. I know you're barely keeping your head above water financially, working yourself to exhaustion to provide for your daughter. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. You had no right. I had every right, he interrupted, but his tone was gentle. You saved my life. That makes you my responsibility whether you want it or not. And what I see is a woman who's fighting battles on every front with no support, no backup, no one watching her six. Let me help you. Why? I demanded. Why would you care? You don't know me. You don't know Aisha. We're nothing to you. You're wrong. His voice was soft but intense, and when he reached across the table, I didn't pull away as his fingers brushed mine. The moment you fought to keep my heart beating, the moment you refused to let me die on that table, you became something to me. And when I look at your daughter, when I see how much you love her, how hard you're fighting to give her a good life. He broke off, something raw crossing his face. Let me be clear, Nurse Washington. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering partnership. You need protection, financial stability, someone to watch your back. I need... He paused, and in that pause, I saw something vulnerable and human beneath the dangerous exterior. What do you need? I asked quietly. To be someone better than who I've been. He said it simply, like a confession. To have a reason to walk away from the darkness I've lived in for so long. To prove to myself that I'm capable of building something instead of just tearing things down. Aisha chose that moment to look up, smiling at both of us. Mommy, look. I drawed you and me in a daddy figure. My heart cracked a little at her innocent words, at the picture she'd created showing 3 stick figures holding hands. Minjun's expression softened as he looked at the drawing, and I saw genuine emotion there. Not manipulation, not calculation, just raw feeling. That's beautiful, Aisha, he said. You're a wonderful artist. Do you have a little girl? She asked him with the directness only children possess. No, he said. I don't have any children, or a wife. I've spent most of my life alone. That's sad, Aisha declared. Everyone should have a family. You're very wise, Minjun told her, and then he looked at me. Your daughter is right. Everyone should have a family. Everyone should have people they can count on. I didn't know what to say. This whole situation was surreal. Sitting in a museum cafe with a man who'd been half dead on my operating table a week ago, who'd just admitted to being some kind of criminal, who was offering me protection and partnership while my daughter drew pictures of found families. It was too much, too fast, too impossible. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is my personal number. Call me anytime, day or night. If you need anything at all, I want you to reach out. No strings attached, no obligations. Just let me help. I took the envelope, feeling its weight. And if I say no? If I decide I want nothing to do with you or your world? Then I'll respect that, but my people will still watch over you, from a distance. You saved my life, Nurse Washington. I don't forget debts like that. We left the museum an hour later, Aisha chattering about the paintings we'd seen and clutching her new tiger. Minjun walked us to my car, hands in his pockets, looking more like a normal man than a criminal kingpin. At the car, he crouched down one more time to Aisha's level. Take care of your mother, okay? She's very special. I know, Aisha said seriously. She's the best mommy ever. I believe it. He stood and met my eyes. Thank you for meeting with me, for giving me a chance to explain. I meant what I said. Call me if you need anything. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As I drove away, I watched him in the rearview mirror, standing alone on the sidewalk, and felt something shift in my chest. Something dangerous and foolish and entirely too tempting. That night, after Aisha was asleep, I opened the envelope. Inside was the personal number he'd mentioned, written in precise handwriting on heavy cardstock. But there was something else. A cashier's check for $50,000, with a note. For Aisha's future. No strings. No debts. Just because she deserves every opportunity. I sat there staring at that check for a long time, feeling tears burn behind my eyes. $50,000 would change everything. Would mean I could work fewer hours, spend more time with Aisha, maybe even hire a lawyer to fight Marcus properly if he tried for custody again. It would mean security, stability, breathing room. It also meant accepting help from a man who lived in shadows and violence, who'd admitted he wasn't good by any normal standard. It meant opening a door I might not be able to close again. I thought about Aisha's drawing, about the daddy figure she'd added without prompting, about the gentleness in Minjun's eyes when he'd looked at her, the vulnerability when he'd talked about being alone, about the way my heart had raced when his fingers brushed mine across the table. I was standing at a crossroads, and whatever choice I made would change everything. I could deposit this check, could call that number, could let Kang Minjun into our lives. Or I could tear it up, walk away, go back to struggling alone, but safe. I didn't cash the check that night, or the next night, or the night after that. It sat on my dresser like a question I wasn't ready to answer, while life continued its relentless forward march. Work, Aisha. My mother's worried questions about the nice foreign man who'd given my daughter such an expensive toy. I deflected, avoided, pretended everything was normal while that piece of paper seemed to glow in the darkness whenever I couldn't sleep. Then Marcus forced my hand. It was a Tuesday afternoon, one of my rare days off, and Aisha and I had gone to the park near our apartment. She was on the swings, pumping her legs and laughing as she flew higher, when I saw him standing by the gate. My ex-husband looked worse than I remembered. Heavier, with the blotchy skin and glassy eyes of someone drinking too much too often. But he was dressed nicely, like he was trying to make an impression, and there was something calculating in his expression that made my stomach drop. Jasmine. He walked toward us with exaggerated casualness, like we were old friends running into each other accidentally. Been trying to reach you. You know the custody agreement, Marcus. You call my lawyer if you want to arrange visitation. See? That's the thing. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My lawyer says I don't need to go through yours anymore. Says we got plenty of cause to revisit the custody arrangement. Get me some real time with my daughter instead of these supervised visits you forced on me. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. You mean the supervised visits the judge ordered because you showed up drunk to the last 3 scheduled meetings? Because you scared Aisha so badly she had nightmares for weeks? That's your story. His voice hardened. But see, I got me a new job now. Got stability, got a nice place, and I got family in this city who can testify what kind of mother you really are. What's that supposed to mean? Means people talk, Jasmine. People see things, like how you're never home, always at that hospital. How you leave our daughter with your mama all the time. How you can barely afford that shitty apartment you living in. He stepped closer, and I caught the smell of whiskey on his breath despite it being 2 p.m. And now I hear you running around with some foreign gangster? Bringing strange men around my daughter? My blood ran cold. How did he know about Minjun? We'd met once in public, completely appropriate. Unless someone had been watching us. Unless Marcus had someone following me. Daddy! Aisha had noticed him, and her face went pale. She stopped swinging, gripping the chains tightly. Hey there, baby girl, Marcus called to her, his voice artificially sweet. Come give your daddy a hug. Aisha looked at me, fear written clearly on her small face. She shook her head slightly, and I saw Marcus's expression darken. You've been poisoning her against me, he hissed, turning my own daughter into a scared little. Don't. I stepped between him and Aisha, my voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare finish that sentence, and don't come near her when you've been drinking. That's violating the custody order, Marcus, and you know it. I ain't drinking, and you can't prove otherwise. He pulled out his phone, started recording. See this? This is documentation of parental alienation. You keeping my daughter from me, filling her head with lies. My lawyer says this is exactly the kind of thing the judge needs to see. I wanted to scream at him, to knock that phone out of his hand, to do something. But I knew that's what he wanted. To provoke me, to get footage of me losing control that he could use against me. So I stood there, shaking with anger and fear, while he recorded me and my daughter cowered on the swings behind me. You keep your distance, Marcus. I'm warning you. Or what? He laughed, a mean sound. What you gonna do, Jasmine? Call the cops? They already know I got rights. No, I'm just a concerned father trying to see his daughter. Maybe they'll be interested in hearing about your new boyfriend, though. About his business associates and their expensive cars. About how you suddenly got money for new clothes for Aisha. He was fishing, I realized. He didn't know about the check. I hadn't cashed it. But he was hoping I'd react, give something away. Get away from us. My voice didn't sound like my own. Right now, or I will call the police and report you for violating the custody agreement. He stared at me for a long moment, calculation clear in his eyes. Then he smiled again, that horrible empty smile. Fine, I'll go. But you ain't heard the last of this. I'm coming for custody, Jasmine. And when I get it, when I prove you're an unfit mother, you gonna regret every day you kept my daughter from me. He walked away, and I stood there shaking, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. Aisha climbed off the swings and wrapped her arms around my legs, and I felt her trembling too. Is Daddy mad at us, Mommy? No, baby. I picked her up even though she was getting too big for it, held her tight against my chest. Everything's going to be okay. Mommy's going to make sure everything's okay. But I didn't know if that was true. As I carried Aisha back to our apartment, hyper-aware of every person on the street, every car that might be following us, I felt the walls closing in. Marcus was serious. He had a lawyer, had some kind of plan. And if he really did file for custody, if he could afford to drag this through court, I didn't know if I could fight him, not alone. Not with my limited resources against whatever he'd managed to scrape together. That night, after Aisha finally fell asleep after an hour of crying and clinging to me, I sat on my bed and pulled out that cashier's check, $50,000, and underneath it, the card with Minjun's personal number. My hands were steady as I dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert, despite it being nearly midnight. Nurse Washington. Jasmine, I said. My name is Jasmine, and I need help. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer, concerned. What happened? I told him everything. About Marcus showing up at the park, his threats, the custody battle he was threatening. About how scared Aisha had been. How I didn't know if I could fight this alone. The words poured out of me, and I realized I hadn't really talked to anyone about this. Not my mother, who was already worried enough. Not my friends from the hospital, who had their own problems. I'd been carrying this weight alone for so long that finally sharing it felt like I could breathe again. Where are you right now? Minjun asked when I finished. Home, my apartment. Why? Lock your doors. Don't let anyone in except me. I'm coming over. Minjun, it's midnight. I just needed to talk. You need more than talk, Jasmine. You need someone in your corner who isn't afraid of men like your ex-husband. Someone who can make him understand that threatening you is a mistake he won't make twice. His voice was hard now, dangerous. Give me your address. I did, and 20 minutes later there was a soft knock on my door. I checked the peephole and saw Minjun standing there in casual clothes, jeans and a dark sweater, looking nothing like the polished businessman from the museum. Behind him stood another man, the older one who'd come to the hospital, carrying what looked like a toolbox. That's Jin, Minjun explained as I let them in, keeping my voice low so we wouldn't wake Aisha. He's going to install a better lock on your door and a security camera. You should have had these already. I'm sorry. I should have insisted. You don't need to. Yes, I do. He looked at me, and the intensity in his eyes stopped my protest. You called me for help, Jasmine. Let me help. While Jin worked on the door, Minjun and I sat in my tiny kitchen. I made tea because I needed something to do with my hands, and he accepted a cup even though I suspected he wouldn't drink it. Up close, in the familiar space of my own apartment, he seemed both more real and more impossible. This dangerous man sitting at my second-hand table, looking at my daughter's drawings on the refrigerator with something soft in his expression. Tell me about him, he said quietly. Your ex-husband. Everything you know. So I did. I told him about meeting Marcus in college, about how charming he'd been at first, how the charm had slowly curdled into control and anger, about the fights that escalated, the nights I'd locked myself in the bathroom while he raged outside, about getting pregnant with Aisha and hoping a baby would fix things, only to realize I was bringing a child into a toxic situation, about the final straw when he'd grabbed me in front of 2-year-old Aisha, and I'd finally found the courage to leave. He never hit me, I said, and then corrected myself. Not really. Pushed me around sometimes, grabbed my arms hard enough to bruise. But mostly it was control. Monitoring my phone, my friends, my money, making me feel small and stupid and trapped. I looked at Minjun. I know that sounds weak. It sounds like survival, he interrupted gently. Like you did what you needed to do to protect yourself and your daughter until you could get out. That's not weakness, Jasmine. That's strength. Something in his voice made me look at him more carefully. You sound like you know what that's like. My mother was in a similar situation, with my father. His hands tightened around the teacup. She died when I was 12. And my father, he taught me what kind of man I never wanted to become. So when I look at men like your ex-husband, men who use their strength to terrorize people smaller and more vulnerable, I feel something very specific. And it's not compassionate. The threat in his voice should have scared me. Instead, I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief that someone finally understood. That someone was angry on my behalf, instead of telling me to be reasonable, to try to work things out, to think about Aisha having a father in her life. What are you going to do? I asked. Nothing illegal, he assured me. Nothing that can come back on you. but your ex-husband is going to receive a visit from some people who will explain, very clearly, why pursuing custody would be a terrible idea. They'll also explain what will happen if he comes near you or Aisha again without permission. And then we're going to make sure you have the resources to fight him properly in court if necessary. The check, I said. I haven't cashed it yet. Cash it. Use it for a lawyer, for better housing, for daycare, for whatever you need. And if you need more, you tell me. He leaned forward. I meant what I said at the museum, Jasmine. You and Aisha are under my protection now. That means something in my world. It means no one touches you without going through me first. Why? I asked again, because I still didn't understand. Why do you care so much? He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When I was a boy, after my mother died, there was no one to protect me from my father. No one to stand between us and his rage. I learned to fight, to survive, to become someone dangerous enough that no one could hurt me again. But I also promised myself that if I ever had the power, the resources, the ability to protect someone the way no one protected my mother, I would do it. He looked at me. You saved my life, Jasmine. Now let me help save yours. Jin finished with the door and showed me how the new security system worked. A camera that fed to an app on my phone, a reinforced lock that couldn't be kicked in, a panic button that would alert Minjun's people immediately. It was professional, thorough, and probably illegal to install without my landlord's permission. I didn't care. Before they left, Minjun paused at the door. One more thing. Tomorrow someone will come by with some information about family law attorneys. I've already done some research. There are 3 excellent lawyers who specialize in custody cases involving domestic violence and parental alienation. Choose whichever one you're most comfortable with. The retainer is already paid. Minjun, I can't. You can. You will. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less dangerous. Let me do this, Jasmine. Let me be useful for something besides what I've been. After they left, I checked on Aisha. She was sleeping peacefully, clutching her tiger, unaware of the dangerous forces I'd just invited into our lives. I stood there watching her breathe, this perfect small person I'd made, and felt something shift inside me. Fear? Yes. But also hope. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe we weren't alone anymore. Maybe the weight I'd been carrying didn't have to crush me. Maybe there was someone strong enough to help me carry it. I went back to my room and finally made a decision. I picked up my phone, opened my banking app, and deposited that check. $50,000 appeared in my account, more money than I'd ever had at once in my life. Enough to change everything. Enough to give Aisha the future she deserved. I set up automatic transfers. $500 a month to savings for Aisha's college fund, $2,000 to a separate account for legal fees, the rest to stay liquid for immediate needs. Then I sent Minjun a text. Thank you. For everything. I don't know how to repay you. His response came immediately. You already did. You gave me a second chance at life. Now I'm returning the favor. I lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar hum of the new security system, feeling the weight of the choices I'd made. I'd accepted money from a criminal. I'd invited violence, controlled, directed, but violence nonetheless, into my life. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, but when I thought about Aisha sleeping safely in the next room, about the terror on her face when she'd seen Marcus, about the years of struggling and fear and barely surviving, I couldn't regret it. Sometimes the only way to fight darkness was with a different kind of darkness. And maybe, just maybe, something good could come from that collision. The lawyer Minjun recommended was named Catherine Walsh, and she scared me a little. In a good way. She was in her 50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. Her office was downtown, sleek and professional. And when I told her about Marcus, about his threats and his history, she didn't flinch or suggest I try mediation or any of the other soft approaches I'd heard before. "He's testing boundaries," she said bluntly, "seeing what he can get away with. Men like your ex-husband are bullies, and bullies only understand strength. We're going to show him strength." She pulled out a file that was already thick with documentation. "Mr. Kang's people have been very thorough. Police reports from your 911 calls during the marriage, hospital records from when you came in with accidental bruising, testimony from your neighbors about the noise and threats. We have everything we need to not only maintain the current custody arrangement, but potentially get his visitation reduced to nothing if he continues this behavior. I don't want to keep Aisha from her father completely," I said, and Catherine raised an eyebrow. "I know how that sounds, but she deserves to have a relationship with him if he can get his act together. I just want her safe." Then we make that clear in our legal response. He can have supervised visitation if and when he completes anger management, maintains sobriety for 6 months, and demonstrates stability. The ball is in his court. She smiled thinly. "But between you and me, men like Marcus rarely follow through on those requirements. They'd rather complain about being victimized than actually do the work to change." Over the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. Catherine filed a motion to dismiss Marcus's custody petition and submitted a counter-motion documenting his violations of the existing custody order. Minjun's people, I'd stopped asking exactly who they were or what they did, delivered evidence I hadn't even known existed. Photos of Marcus stumbling out of bars, records of him losing his stable job for showing up drunk, testimony from his own family members about his drinking problem. And then there was the visit. I didn't see it happen, but Marcus called me 3 days after I'd hired Catherine, his voice shaking with rage and something else. Fear. "What the fuck did you do? Jasmine? What kind of people are you involved with? I don't know what you're talking about." "Some men came to see me, foreigners. They knew things about me, about my family, things no one should know. They said," his voice cracked, "they said if I kept pursuing custody, they'd make sure I lost more than just my daughter. What does that mean? Are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening you, Marcus. I'm protecting my daughter. If people came to talk to you, maybe it's because you needed to hear that your behavior has consequences." I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. "The court date is in 3 weeks. If you want to be part of Aisha's life, show up sober and be honest. Otherwise, leave us alone." He hung up on me, but he didn't call back. And when the court date came, he didn't show up at all. The judge, clearly irritated at having his time wasted, granted my motion to maintain the current custody arrangement and added additional stipulations about Marcus needing to complete substance abuse treatment before any future modifications would be considered. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like I could breathe for the first time in months. Catherine shook my hand, told me to call if Marcus tried anything else, and sent me a bill that showed a zero balance, already paid in full by an anonymous benefactor. I knew exactly who that benefactor was. Minjun had started calling me regularly, not every day, but several times a week, usually in the evening, after Aisha was asleep, when I was alone with my thoughts and the quiet of the apartment. We talked about everything and nothing. His childhood in Seoul before his family immigrated to Chicago, my nursing school experiences, the books we'd read, the movies we loved. He had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard, and a surprising knowledge of art and literature for someone in his line of work. "My mother loved to read," he explained one night. "Even when things were bad with my father, even when we barely had enough to eat, she made sure I had books. Said that education was the one thing no one could take from me." There was a long pause. "She would have liked you, I think. Would have appreciated how hard you fight for your daughter." "I wish I could have met her," I said softly. "Me too." His voice was thick with emotion. "She would have loved Aisha. My mother always wanted grandchildren, but He stopped. "But you never found the right person?" I prompted gently. I never thought I deserved that kind of happiness. The life I've lived, the things I've done, they don't lead to white picket fences and family dinners. I accepted that a long time ago. And now? Another pause, longer this time. Now I wonder if acceptance was just another word for giving up. If maybe there's still time to become someone different. Someone worthy of... He didn't finish the sentence, but I heard what he wasn't saying. A month after the court victory, Minjun asked if he could take Aisha and me to dinner. Somewhere nice, he said, to celebrate. I hesitated, knowing that accepting meant crossing another line, moving from grateful recipient of his help to something more personal. But when I mentioned it to Aisha, her face lit up with excitement. Can we go to that restaurant with the fish tanks? Like on TV? Minjun had somehow known exactly which restaurant she meant, and made reservations at Shaw's Crab House, where massive aquariums lined the walls and children could watch the fish while they ate. He picked us up in a different car than before, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. But he jumped out to open our doors like a gentleman, and helped Aisha with her seatbelt with patient care. At the restaurant, he'd requested a table by the biggest aquarium, and Aisha was mesmerized immediately. She pressed her face to the glass, pointing out different fish and making up stories about their lives. Minjun listened to her with complete attention, asking questions and treating her observations with the seriousness they deserved. "That one is the daddy fish," Aisha declared, pointing to a large grouper. "He's protecting all the little fish from the sharks." "That's a very important job," Minjun agreed. "Protecting the ones you love is the most important job there is." Over dinner, lobster mac and cheese for Aisha, crab cakes for me, and some complicated seafood dish for Minjun that he barely touched. I watched him interact with my daughter. He was different with her than he was with me. Softer, more open, letting his guard down in ways I suspected he rarely did. When Aisha spilled her juice, he just laughed and helped her clean it up, telling her about the time he'd spilled an entire bowl of kimchi stew in his mother's kitchen and gotten it everywhere. "Were you in trouble?" Aisha asked, wide-eyed. "Oh, yes, but my mother said that mistakes are how we learn. And then she taught me how to clean properly, so next time I would know what to do." He smiled at the memory, and I saw genuine warmth in his expression. "Your mother is very wise like that too. She knows that what matters isn't being perfect. It's trying your best and learning from mistakes." After dinner, Minjun asked if we wanted to walk along the river. It was a beautiful evening, unseasonably warm for November, and the city lights reflected off the water in shifting patterns of gold and silver. Aisha ran ahead, staying within sight, but giving us a moment of relative privacy. "Thank you," I said, "for all of this. The lawyer, the security, tonight. You've done so much for us." "I haven't done nearly enough." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Jasmine, I need to be honest with you about something." My heart started racing. "Okay. This," he gestured between us, "what started as repaying a debt, it's become something else, at least for me. When I talk to you, when I see you with Aisha, when I think about your life and your future." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "I'm not good at this. Feelings, vulnerability, any of it. My world doesn't usually allow for that kind of weakness. But with you, I find I don't want to hide anymore." "Minjun," I started, not sure what I was going to say. "I know it's complicated. I know who I am and what I do. I know you have every reason to walk away, to take what I've given you and never see me again. But I'm asking, hoping, that maybe you'll give me a chance. Not as someone repaying a debt, but as a man who wants to be part of your life, part of Aisha's life. A man who wants to become someone better because you make him believe it's possible." I looked at him standing there in the glow of the streetlights, this dangerous, powerful man who'd been shot and survived, who commanded respect and fear from people I'd never meet, who just admitted to vulnerability with the awkwardness of someone unpracticed at emotional honesty. And I thought about the past 2 months, about how he'd never once made me feel small or controlled, how he'd respected every boundary while offering support, how he looked at Aisha like she was precious and important. I'm scared, I admitted. Of you, of your world, of what this could mean. I've already made so many mistakes in my life, trusted the wrong person, put Aisha at risk because I didn't see clearly who her father really was. What if I'm making the same mistake again? You're not. His voice was firm. Marcus wanted to make you smaller so he could feel bigger. I want to see you thrive, to support you becoming everything you're capable of being. Marcus saw Aisha as property, as something that belonged to him. I see her as a miracle, as someone to be protected and cherished and helped to grow. He stepped closer. I won't lie to you, Jasmine. My life has dangers, people who would hurt me by hurting people I care about. But I would die before I let anyone harm you or your daughter. And I have the resources, the connections, the experience to make sure that protection is real and effective. Mommy, look! Aisha's voice called out, and we both turned to see her pointing at a street performer doing magic tricks. Can we watch? Of course, baby. I looked back at Minjun. I need time to think, to process, to figure out what this means. But I'm not saying no. I'm saying, give me time to catch up to where you are. Relief flooded his face. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. We joined Aisha and watched the street performer, who made coins disappear and reappear to her delighted laughter. Minjun stood close enough that our shoulders touched, and I didn't move away. When Aisha got tired, he offered to carry her back to the car, and she wrapped her arms around his neck trustingly, resting her head on his shoulder. I like Minjun, she murmured sleepily. He's nice. Not scary like Daddy. My throat tightened with emotion, and when I looked at Minjun, I saw his eyes were bright, with something that might have been tears. He carried her so carefully, like she was made of glass, and when we got back to the car, he buckled her in with gentle precision before opening my door as well. The drive back to my apartment was quiet, Aisha sleeping in the back seat, the city sliding past the windows in streams of light. Minjun's hand rested on the center console, and after a moment of hesitation, I reached over and took it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. At my door, with Aisha drowsy in my arms, Minjun said goodnight. Sweet dreams, princess, he told Aisha, brushing a gentle hand over her hair. And to me, text me when you're both safe inside. I nodded, and he waited until I'd locked the new security lock he'd installed before walking away. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I watched him pause at his car, looking back at my building with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then he drove away, and I was left standing in my small apartment with my sleeping daughter, and a heart that felt dangerously full of hope. That night, lying in bed, I pulled out my phone and looked at our text conversation. The messages were mundane. Good mornings, check-ins, shared jokes. But underneath them was something bigger. Something growing whether I was ready for it or not. I typed out a message and then deleted it 3 times before finally finding the right words. Thank you for tonight. For seeing us. For making Aisha feel special. For making me feel like maybe good things are still possible. His response came quickly. They are possible, Jasmine. With you, they feel inevitable. Sleep well. I did sleep well that night, better than I had in years. And when I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window and Aisha singing in the next room, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten what it was called. I felt safe. I felt hopeful. I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were finally going to be okay. The holidays changed everything. Thanksgiving came first, and my mother insisted on hosting despite her small apartment being barely big enough for the three of us. I mentioned it to Min-Jun during one of our evening calls, not really expecting anything, just sharing the details of my life like I'd gotten used to doing. "Does your mother know about me?" he asked. "She knows someone helped us with the legal situation, that someone's been looking out for us." I hesitated. "I haven't told her everything. About what you do, about how we met, just that you're a friend." "Am I? A friend?" His voice was careful, and I could hear the question underneath the question. "I think you're becoming more than that," I admitted. "But I'm taking it slow. For Aisha's sake, for mine." "I understand." There was a pause. "Would your mother mind if I sent something for Thanksgiving? Nothing extravagant. Just, I'd like to contribute." The something that arrived the day before Thanksgiving was a complete feast from a high-end catering company. A perfectly roasted turkey, sides that looked like they belonged in a magazine, 3 different kinds of pie, and enough food to feed my mother's entire building. The delivery person also brought a beautiful bouquet of flowers, with a card that read, "For Mrs. Williams, with gratitude for raising such an extraordinary daughter, Kang Min-Jun." My mother called me immediately. "Jasmine Nicole Washington, you need to tell me exactly who this man is and what his intentions are." "Mama, don't mama me. This is not the gift of a casual friend. This is the gift of a man who is serious, a man who understands how to honor family." She paused. "He's the one who helped with Marcus, isn't he? The one who made those legal fees disappear?" "Yes," I admitted. "Then I want to meet him, properly. Invite him to Thanksgiving dinner. If he's going to be part of your life, part of Aisha's life, I need to look him in the eye and take his measure." So I called Min-Jun, expecting him to politely decline. Instead, he accepted immediately. "I'd be honored. What time should I arrive? And what can I bring? I know your mother sent the food, but it would be rude to come empty-handed." He showed up on Thanksgiving afternoon carrying an expensive bottle of wine, a bouquet of flowers for my mother, and a toy drum set for Aisha that she immediately fell in love with, and I immediately regretted. But watching her beat on those drums with pure joy, watching Min-Jun crouch down to show her different rhythms, while my mother and I finished setting the table, I couldn't bring myself to tell her to stop. "That child is going to drive you crazy with that thing," my mother observed, but she was smiling. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Min-Jun had a gift for putting people at ease when he wanted to, and he charmed my mother within the first 10 minutes by asking about her job as a church secretary and listening with genuine interest to her stories. When Aisha demanded he sit next to her, he complied without hesitation, cutting her turkey and making sure she ate her vegetables before letting her have pie. After dinner, while Aisha was occupied with her new drums in the living room, my mother cornered Min-Jun in the kitchen while I pretended not to be listening from the doorway. "My daughter's been hurt before," she said bluntly, "by a man who said he loved her, but really just wanted to control her. And that baby in there, she's already been through more than any child should have to go through. So I'm going to ask you straight. What are your intentions with my daughter and granddaughter?" I expected him to be diplomatic, to deflect. Instead, Min-Jun met my mother's eyes directly. "Mrs. Williams, I won't insult your intelligence by pretending I'm a simple businessman. You've probably heard things about me, about my organization. Some of them are true. I've lived a life that wasn't always honorable. But your daughter," his voice softened, "she saved my life. And in doing so, She gave me a reason to become someone better. My intentions are to protect her and Aisha, to support them in every way I can. And if Jasmine will allow it, to earn the right to be part of their family. I know I'm not what you probably wanted for her, but I promise you, I will never hurt her. I will never make her feel small or afraid. I will treat Aisha like she's precious, because she is. And I will spend every day trying to deserve the chance they've given me. There was a long silence. Then my mother nodded slowly. You messed this up, Mr. Kang. You'll answer to more than just lawyers and police. You'll answer to me and to God. Are we clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. He almost smiled. And please, call me Minjun. I hope we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. After that Thanksgiving, Minjun became a regular presence in our lives. Not overwhelming, not controlling, but there. He took us to the Museum of Science and Industry, where Aisha spent 3 hours in the kids' exhibit building things and learning. He showed up at my apartment one Saturday with groceries and ingredients for Korean dishes, teaching me how to make kimchi jjigae, while Aisha helped by making a mess with the vegetables. He came to Aisha's preschool winter concert and sat next to me, holding my hand while we watched her sing off key with complete confidence. And slowly, carefully, I led him further into my heart. It wasn't like with Marcus, that intense rush of infatuation that had blinded me to red flags. This was different, steadier, deeper, built on actual knowledge of each other. I saw Minjun's flaws, his tendency to solve problems with money or influence, when sometimes what was needed was just presence, his occasional nightmares that he tried to hide, the shadows that crossed his face when he thought I wasn't looking. But I also saw his strengths, his loyalty, his protectiveness, the way he listened when I talked about my dreams of maybe going back to school, getting my nurse practitioner degree, having more options than just emergency room night shifts. You should do it, he said when I mentioned it one evening. We were sitting on my couch, Aisha asleep in her room, the city quiet outside my window. Go back to school. I can help with tuition, with childcare, with whatever you need. I can't keep letting you pay for everything, I protested. You've already done so much. Jasmine. He turned to face me fully, taking both my hands. When are you going to understand that helping you isn't a burden? It's a privilege. Seeing you thrive, seeing Aisha happy and secure, knowing I played some small part in that matters more to me than any business deal or negotiation or power play. You matter more to me than anything. Minjun, I love you, he said simply. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I've spent my whole life being careful with my feelings, keeping people at arm's length, never letting anyone close enough to matter. And then you came into my life. And suddenly, all that careful distance feels like just another kind of prison. I love you, Jasmine. I love your strength and your compassion, and the way you fight for your daughter. I love your terrible jokes and how you sing off key in the car when you think I'm not listening. I love that you see me. Not just the dangerous parts or the powerful parts, but all of me. And you haven't run away. And I love Aisha like she's already mine. Like the family I thought I'd never have is right here, waiting, if I'm brave enough to reach for it. Tears were running down my face. I love you too, I whispered. It terrifies me how much I love you. How much Aisha loves you. How much losing you would destroy us both. You're not going to lose me. He pulled me closer, and I let myself lean into his warmth, let myself believe in this impossible thing we were building. I'm not Marcus. I'm not going to leave or betray you or make you regret trusting me. I'm here, Jasmine, for as long as you'll have me. He kissed me then, soft and careful, like I was something precious. And for the first time since my marriage fell apart, since I became a single mother fighting battles on every front, I let myself believe that maybe I deserved this. Deserved love and partnership, and someone who saw my worth. Christmas came, and Minjun went overboard despite my protests. He got Aisha so many presents that my mother's living room looked like a toy store had exploded. But more than the gifts, he gave us his time. He helped Aisha decorate cookies, getting flour everywhere and laughing when she put frosting in his hair. He sat through the Polar Express 3 times because it was her favorite Christmas movie. He came to Christmas Eve service at my mother's church, sitting through hymns and prayers with respectful attention, even though I suspected he hadn't been in a church since his mother's funeral. "What do you want for Christmas?" Aisha asked him while we were decorating the tree at my mother's apartment. "I already have everything I want," he said, looking at me over her head with such open affection that my mother actually smiled. But he must have thought about it later, because on Christmas morning, after all the presents were opened and Aisha was occupied with her new toys, he pulled me aside. "I do want something," he said quietly. "But it's not really a Christmas present. It's more of a proposal." My heart jumped into my throat. Minjun. Not that kind of proposal. Not yet. He smiled at my panic. "I want you and Aisha to move in with me. I have a house in Lincoln Park. Too big for one person. Perfect for a family. Better neighborhood, better schools. A yard where Aisha can play. Security that doesn't rely on one camera and a good lock. Space for you to study when you start your NP program." He pulled out a key. "This is yours whether you take it now or later. But I'm tired of leaving you at the end of the night. Tired of only being part of your life in pieces. I want to wake up and make Aisha breakfast. Want to help her with homework and tuck her in and be there when she has nightmares. I want to come home to you after difficult days and celebrate good news together and build a life that's ours, not just scheduled visits and careful boundaries." I stared at that key, feeling the weight of what he was offering. Moving in together was huge. Was commitment and mingled lives and Aisha getting even more attached to someone who could still, theoretically, walk away? But as I thought about it, I realized that ship had already sailed. Aisha called him Minjun, but looked at him with the trust and love she'd never shown Marcus. I went to bed thinking about him and woke up wanting to share every small detail of my day. We were already a family in everything but a dress. "Okay," I said. "Yes, we'll move in with you." His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something warm and joyful. "You've just made me the happiest man alive." "Wait," I said as he started to pull me in for a kiss. "There are conditions. I pay rent or contribute equally to household expenses. I'm not going to be a kept woman. And we need to be honest with Aisha about what this means. That we're together. That you're going to be a consistent presence in her life, but also that we're not getting married tomorrow. She needs stability, not more upheaval." Agreed to all of it, though I should warn you, the amount you'll insist on paying won't even cover the utilities. He was teasing now, happy, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure everything out together. We told Aisha later that day, sitting her down and explaining that we were all going to live together in a new house. Her reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "Does this mean Minjun will be my new daddy?" Minjun and I exchanged glances, navigating this carefully. "I'll be someone who loves you and takes care of you," he said gently. "But you already have a daddy, even if he isn't around very much right now. I'll be Minjun, and I'll always be here for you, okay? But you'll live with us? Forever and ever?" "Forever and ever," he promised, and I saw him mean it. "You, your mom, and me. We're a family now." Aisha threw herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "I love you, Minjun. I love you too, princess." His voice was rough with emotion, and when he looked at me over her head, his eyes were wet. So much. We moved into Minjun's house 2 weeks later. The place was exactly as he'd described, beautiful and far too big. but with a warmth that suggested it had been waiting for us to fill it. Aisha's new bedroom was twice the size of her old one, with built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the garden. My room, our room now, had an ensuite bathroom and a walk-in closet that made me laugh at the absurdity of having that much space for my modest wardrobe. But more than the physical space, what struck me was how easily we fell into routines. Minjun made coffee every morning while I got Aisha ready for school. We took turns cooking dinner, discovering that he was surprisingly skilled in the kitchen, and I was absolutely hopeless with anything more complicated than pasta. Evenings were spent helping Aisha with her homework, watching movies together on the massive couch in the living room, reading stories before bed. It was domestic and normal and absolutely perfect in ways I hadn't known life could be. "Is this what you imagined?" I asked one night after Aisha was asleep. We were curled up together on that couch, the house quiet around us, and I felt more at peace than I could remember feeling in years. "No," he said honestly. "I never let myself imagine anything like this. Never thought I deserved it or could have it. But now that it's real, now that you're here..." He pulled me closer. "This is better than any imagination could have conjured. This is everything." 3 months into our new life together, reality came knocking in the form of Minjun's past. I came home from an evening shift to find him in his study, the door closed, voices raised in Korean. I'd learned enough about his business to know when something was wrong, and the tension radiating from that room set my nerves on edge. I checked on Aisha, sleeping peacefully, unaware, then waited in the kitchen. 20 minutes later, Minjun emerged looking older than I'd ever seen him, his face drawn with stress. "What's wrong?" I asked. He poured himself a drink, something he rarely did, and downed it in one swallow. "There's a situation. A rival organization is pushing into territory I've controlled for years. They're being aggressive, violent. 3 of my people were hospitalized last week, and one of my businesses was burned down." He looked at me. "I've been handling it quietly, trying to resolve things without dragging you and Aisha into the ugliness. But tonight they made it clear they know about you. About Aisha. They're threatening the people I love to get to me." My blood ran cold. What does that mean? Are we in danger? Not immediate danger. I have too many protections in place, too many people watching you both. But Jasmine... He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to recognize. "This is the reality of my life. The life I brought you into. And I need to know, are you strong enough for this? Can you trust me to handle it? Or should I move you and Aisha somewhere safe until this is resolved?" I thought about running, about taking Aisha and disappearing until the danger passed. It would be the sensible thing, the motherly thing. But I also thought about Minjun facing this alone, about the life we'd built together in such a short time, about the promises we'd made. "We're not leaving," I said firmly. "But you need to tell me everything. No more protecting me from the ugliness. If I'm going to be your partner, I need to know what we're facing." Relief flooded his face. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I'm sure. We're family, Minjun. That means we face things together." He told me everything that night, about his organization's structure, about the businesses he controlled, some legal, some not, most existing in that gray area he'd mentioned when we first met. About the rival group led by a man named Chen, who was trying to consolidate power in Chicago's underworld, and saw Minjun as the biggest obstacle. About the violence that was escalating, the pressure from both sides to respond with force. "I've been trying to go legitimate," he said. "Slowly transitioning out of the illegal operations, investing in legitimate businesses, creating distance from the violence. But these things take time, and Chen sees the transition as weakness, an opportunity." He looked at me. "I need to shut him down completely. Make it clear that threatening my family was the worst mistake he could make. But I need to do it in a way that doesn't come back on you or Aisha, in a way that keeps you both safe." Over the next few weeks, I watched Minjun transform. The gentle man who read bedtime stories to Aisha was still there, but underneath was the dangerous person I'd glimpsed that first night in the ER. Cold, strategic, absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting what was his. He hired additional security for the house, had bulletproof glass installed in all the windows, made sure I knew emergency protocols, and had direct lines to his most trusted people. "I don't like this," I told him one night after a particularly tense day. "I don't like seeing you like this. Don't like knowing people are trying to hurt you." "I know, but it will be over soon." He held me close. "I promise, Jasmine. One way or another, this ends. And then I'm out. Completely out. I'll sell off everything questionable, take whatever losses I have to take, and we'll build a life that's clean, that's safe, that Aisha can be proud of when she's old enough to understand." I wanted to believe him, but I also knew that the world he lived in didn't let people go easily. The crisis came on a Tuesday in March. I was at work when my phone exploded with alerts. Calls from Minjun's people, texts telling me to stay at the hospital, messages that made my heart stop. There had been an attempted kidnapping at Aisha's school. Someone had tried to grab her during recess. I left work immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely drive. The school was surrounded by police cars when I arrived, and I ran through the building until I found her, safe in the principal's office wrapped in a blanket, crying but unhurt. Minjun was already there, holding her, his face a mask of controlled rage that terrified me even as I felt grateful for it. "The man who tried to take her is in custody," the police detective told us. "He's claiming he was hired to kidnap the girl as leverage in a business dispute. Do either of you know what that might be about?" "No," Minjun lied smoothly. "But I intend to find out. And when I do, whoever is responsible will regret ever hearing my daughter's name." His daughter. Not her daughter or the child. His daughter. And in that moment, I saw the truth of it. Aisha was his in every way that mattered, and heaven help anyone who threatened her. That night, after Aisha finally fell asleep in our bed, exhausted from crying and fear, Minjun and I sat in his study. His phone hadn't stopped ringing, his people reporting in, giving updates, asking for orders. I listened to him speak in Korean, understanding nothing but recognizing the tone of command, of controlled violence about to be unleashed. "What are you going to do?" I asked when he finally hung up. "I'm going to end this. Tonight." Chen crossed a line he can never come back from. He threatened my daughter. The way he said it left no room for doubt about how this would end. "Will you—" I swallowed hard. "Will you have to kill him? Do you want the truth?" When I nodded, he continued. "Probably not personally. But yes, he'll die tonight. Him and everyone in his organization who knew about the plan to take Aisha. I won't let people who threaten my family keep breathing." I should have been horrified. Should have told him there had to be another way, that violence only bred more violence. But when I thought about someone trying to grab my baby, about the fear in her eyes when I'd found her at school, about how close we'd come to losing her, I couldn't summon the moral outrage. "Okay," I said simply. "Do what you need to do. Just come home safe." He looked at me with something like awe. "You're not going to try to stop me? Tell me there's a better way?" There probably is a better way. But I'm Aisha's mother before I'm anything else. And I need to know she's safe. If that makes me a bad person, I'll learn to live with it. I stood up and kissed him. "Just promise me this is the end of it. That after tonight we can really start over. Clean slate, legal business, no more danger. I promise. After tonight, it's over. All of it." He left at midnight, surrounded by serious men in dark clothing. I stayed up all night, holding Aisha while she slept, checking my phone obsessively for updates that didn't come. At 5 a.m, I heard the front door open. Minjun appeared in the bedroom doorway, looking exhausted but unhurt. "It's done," he said simply. "Chen is dead, his organization is scattered, and I've sent a message to everyone in this city that my family is completely off limits. No one will ever threaten you or Aisha again." I didn't ask for details, didn't want to know exactly what "it's done" meant, or how many people had died to secure our safety. I just held out my hand, and he came to bed, wrapping himself around Aisha and me like we were precious treasure he'd almost lost. The next few months were strange. The police investigated Chen's death and the destruction of his organization, but no one was ever charged. Minjun's name never came up, at least not officially. He kept his promise about going legitimate. I watched him sell off businesses, transfer assets, distance himself from anything illegal. It meant taking financial hits he'd never have accepted before, walking away from power and influence that had defined him for years. "Do you regret it?" I asked one night. "Giving all that up?" He looked at me like I was crazy. I traded illegal money and dangerous power for Sunday morning pancakes with my daughter and falling asleep next to the woman I love every night. There's no universe where I regret that trade. In May, Minjun took me to dinner at a fancy restaurant in the city. My mother had Aisha for the night, and I'd dressed in a new dress he'd bought me, green silk that made me feel beautiful. Over dessert, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I have something to ask you, and I need you to hear me out before you answer." "Okay," I said nervously. "I know we said we'd take things slow. That marriage wasn't something to rush into. But Jasmine..." He pulled out a small box, and my heart started racing. "You and Aisha are my entire world. Every good thing in my life, every reason I have to be better, comes from you two. I want to make it official. Want Aisha to have my name and my protection legally, not just in practice. Want you to be my wife, my partner, my everything. Will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, unique and thoughtful, and nothing like the generic engagement ring Marcus had given me. But more than the ring, it was the look in Minjun's eyes that made my decision easy. "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on my finger and then came around the table to kiss me properly, not caring that the entire restaurant was watching. When we finally broke apart, he whispered, "Thank you for saving my life, for giving me a family, for making me believe I deserved happiness. Thank you," I whispered back, "for showing me what real love looks like, for loving my daughter like she's yours, for fighting for us even when it meant giving up everything else." We got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at my mother's church. Aisha was our flower girl, wearing a white dress and carrying a basket of rose petals she scattered with great seriousness. My mother cried through the whole ceremony. Minjun's people, the ones who'd become legitimate business people along with him, filled half the church, and I realized with surprise that they weren't just employees. They were family. When the pastor asked if anyone objected, Marcus stood up from the back row. I hadn't known he was there, hadn't invited him, and my heart sank as he opened his mouth to speak. But before he could say anything, Minjun turned to look at him. Didn't say a word, just looked. And in that look was everything. A reminder of what had happened the last time Marcus threatened his family. A promise of what would happen if he interrupted this moment. A clear message that this family was protected. Marcus sat back down without speaking. And when the ceremony was over, he was gone. "Did you know he'd be here?" I asked Minjun later at the reception. "I had a feeling, and I wanted him to see this, to see you happy, Aisha safe, our family strong, to understand that you don't need him and never will again." He pulled me close. I wanted him to see what a real father looks like, what real love looks like, so he knows exactly what he lost. At the reception, Minjun danced with Aisha to her favorite song, and I watched my daughter, our daughter, laugh with pure joy as he spun her around. She'd started calling him Dad recently, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. And every time she said it, I saw him light up like she'd given him the greatest gift imaginable. "You know what the best part is?" my mother said, coming to stand beside me. She doesn't remember being afraid anymore, doesn't flinch when he raises his voice or moves too quickly. She just knows she's loved and safe. That's what you gave her, baby. That's what he gave both of you. 6 months after the wedding, Minjun officially adopted Aisha. We'd talked to her about it first, made sure she understood what it meant. She'd looked at both of us with those wise 5-year-old eyes and said, "Does this mean Dad will be my dad forever? Like, legal and everything?" "Legal and everything," Minjun confirmed. "Good, because he's the best dad ever, and I want to keep him." At the adoption hearing, the judge asked Aisha if this was what she wanted. She stood up in her best dress and announced, "Minjun, Dad, he saved us. Mommy says Mommy saved his life first, but he saved us too. He made us safe and happy and a real family. So yes, I want him to be my dad forever." The judge granted the adoption, and Aisha became Aisha Washington Kang officially. Minjun cried openly in the courtroom, holding his daughter and not caring who saw his tears. And I stood there thinking about the journey that had brought us here. From a bloody ER trauma bay to this moment of pure legal and emotional connection. How something that had started with violence and danger had transformed into this. Family, love, healing. A year after we got married, I graduated from the nurse practitioner program I'd enrolled in. Thanks to Minjun's support and my mother's help with childcare, I took a job at a community health clinic, working with underserved populations, using my experience and education to help people who reminded me of who I'd been. Struggling, scared, fighting to survive. Minjun's legitimate businesses were thriving, and he'd become something of a philanthropist, funding programs for domestic violence survivors and at-risk youth. "You know what's funny?" I said one night as we sat on our back porch, watching Aisha play in the yard with the dog Minjun had surprised her with for her 7th birthday. People look at us now and see a normal family, professional parents, happy kid, nice house. They have no idea about the chaos and danger and complicated history that got us here. Does that bother you? That they don't know? I thought about it. No, because the chaos was just the beginning. What matters is what we built from it, who we became because of it. I leaned against him. "I saved your life that night in the ER, but you saved mine too. Saved Aisha's. Gave us the family we deserved but never thought we'd find. We saved each other," he corrected gently. "And we'll keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." Aisha called out then, wanting us to see the cartwheel she'd learned, and we both got up to watch and cheer. As I stood there with Minjun's arm around my waist and my daughter's laughter filling the air, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago. Exhausted, alone, terrified for her daughter's future. That woman would never have believed this happiness was possible, would never have imagined that the patient bleeding out on her trauma table would become her husband, her partner, the father her daughter deserved. Life was strange and complicated and often unfair. But sometimes, if you were brave enough or desperate enough or just lucky enough, it also gave you exactly what you needed, wrapped in the most unexpected package. Sometimes it gave you a second chance. Sometimes it gave you a family built not on blood alone, but on choice, on commitment, on the decision to save each other and keep saving each other day after day after day. And that was more than enough. That was everything.